the Packers just wiped the floor with the Cowboys in this one. I think the Cowboys end up bringing, there's some garbage time points. And I think they closed the scoring gap a little bit by the end. But for the most part, I mean, 20, 30-point game through the majority of it. And I mean, we were talking a couple weeks ago during that Cowboys Lions game when the ref does the whole thing, the player checks in, the ref misses it, they screw up, the Cowboys end up winning the game. What kind of influence does the league have? Again, we're not saying the league is rigged or the league is necessarily scripted, but what is going on? And I guess I didn't anticipate that the league was rigged against the Cowboys. I think everybody thought maybe that the league would be rigged for the Cowboys, but this is just the script, right? Because it's just, I mean, I felt like I was back at every other year in a Cowboys playoff game. And this, from a scoring standpoint, was the worst one, obviously. But again, just sitting there being like, wait a second, this team had hopes and dreams and was like, ooh, maybe this is the year where we actually can get something going. No, this team is actually the best team that we've had recently. I think we can actually make a run this year. And then I don't want to say right away, but pretty quickly, Dak is throwing the pick. And then I think the pick six also was, early second quarter as well, too. And that's really when the game started. You could really see where it was going for the Cowboys. So, I mean, this is it. This is it for the Cowboys, right? This is just their script for these NFL years. Is there anything they can do to break this cycle? Do we need new writers for the NFL?
Sometimes I'll get on board with the NFL scripts and stuff, but I'm going to let my Cowboys bias get in the way. The Cowboys in the playoffs have not been good since probably 1996. And I mean, I know I'm not the only one who saw this coming. I bet on the Packers this game. But of course I bet on the Packers this game. This Cowboys team in the playoffs is awful. Their playoff losses have just proven three things to me. And the third one's kind of not really a playoff, but the first one is Dak needs to go. Second one is Mike McCarthy needs to go. And the third one is obviously in the first year as a running back, Tony Pollard cannot be trusted to be the lead back. He's got to be behind somebody else. And with the Cowboys, he threw for 303 yards in this game and 3 touchdowns, and it's still not enough. It's coaching or game planning or something. But Dak in big pressure moments has never been it, and he's just proved it time and time and again. And for a team who's consistently in the playoffs to keep a quarterback who has shown you that he can't get the job done when he needs to get it done, I don't understand why he's still on the team. And a coach like Mike McCarthy, who has set up game plans all year. They went 8-0 at home, and their first home loss of the season was to the worst-seeded NFC team in the playoffs. It's just you can't have that happen as an NFL franchise and expect to be respected as a powerhouse team.
So Dak now, and I think one of the things that Sam was really focused on this year with Dak was, I mean, he was turning 30 this year. So, big picture for where you're at in the arc of your career, you're kind of supposed to be in a spot by 30. And if you look at the quarterbacks that have won the Super Bowl since 2000, their first Super Bowl after the age of 30, you've got Brad Johnson won it in Tampa. And I think that Tampa Bay Bucks team as well, too, was, I think everybody understands the defense that team had. You've got Drew Brees on the Saints. Sean Payton paid the players. Did they cheat? Who knows? You've got Matt Stafford when he won the Super Bowl on the Rams a couple seasons ago. And then you've got Peyton Manning, who won 2 Super Bowls post 30. And Dak's obviously not Peyton Manning, but Peyton's an interesting one because if you look at the playoff numbers before that Super Bowl run, and even in that Super Bowl run, but some of the playoff numbers that he had before that were, they were definitely not to what he was putting up in the regular season. And Dak, again, is not Manning, but this season, Dak was Dak good this regular season? Because the thing is, it did seem like he took a little bit of a level up. And, when he was throwing the interceptions in that game, it was making me think about when we were, here week 2 after that Cardinals game, or maybe week 3, and he threw that pick over the middle in the end zone at the end of the game, cost him the game. And he was kind of making those same mistakes again in this Packers one. But I mean, for the most part of the season, the thing that I don't understand wasn't Dak Prescott not one of the better quarterbacks in the league this year?
I mean, throughout the whole season, he was one of the better NFL quarterbacks. And He was like on like I hate the Cowboys so much, but he was starting to change like the narrative on the Cowboys and like how I felt about them. And then as soon as we get to the playoffs, it's the same old Dak and the same old Cowboys. But yeah, he was an MVP candidate at one point. I think he was the favorite at one point
Yeah.
through the season. He had like a 5 game stretch of one of the best, most efficient passers in the NFL. And then just of course we get to the playoffs and they straight up just shit the bed. Like I'm not gonna sugarcoat it.
And that's the part about this that seems the worst because the other Dak Prescott Cowboys moments have all been kind of moments, and the games have seemed to have been competitive. And there were, I think times in all of those matchups where like, okay, maybe this team should have won. And I know this team was on paper the better team going into the game, but you're right. Like, there's just no way that they should have won this game. This game wasn't close. Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb were not in sync. I know some of the Micah Parsons numbers were not great. I don't think he necessarily played poorly in this one. And I don't like you're saying he has to go. So do you think is there a team that Dak works on? Because again, like you put, Brad Johnson, I think Dak is like he may not be Manning, but he's definitely not Brad Johnson either. Like you're saying, he was an MVP candidate this year. So is it just the Cowboys need to start fresh and Dak, there's still hope for him somewhere else? Or is it all of these guys, this was it for them? Like this was their last straw?
I mean, with Dak going up in age and like this can sound like shitty, but like he would work on a team that doesn't make the playoffs. Like in the regular
Hmm.
season, it's almost year after year. He's like a top five quarterback, and the second he hits a game that he has to win, he can't do it. So I just don't know. Like there's not a lot of, in my opinion, there shouldn't be a lot of front offices or teams that should be like, oh, that's the quarterback I want on my team. No, like you play the entire season to make a postseason game. Like they were grateful enough that the Eagles shit the bed so bad that they ended up with the 2 seed and won the NFC East. And then their way of showing everybody that they're worth that 2 seed and winning the division is losing by 16 to the Green Bay Packers, who got in by half a game.
Would you trade Russell Wilson for Dak right now? And that's an interesting one too because of where Russell Wilson's at. But I mean, we know where you just stand on Prescott. Would you bring him in for the Broncos?
I
1 year left in his
for the regular
contract.
season, if we can play him as the regular season quarterback and then bench him in the first round of the playoffs, I'll bring him in.
Put Stidham in for the playoffs.
Put
Bring
yeah,
Stidham
put
for
anyone
playoff
else.
quarterback.
Re-sign Ben DiNucci. Give me Trace McSorley. Fuck it, even sign Colin Kaepernick. Sign anybody other than Dak for a
Oh,
playoff game.
so you're saying Bill Belichick and Colin Kaepernick saved the Cowboys?
A quarterback that can win in the postseason and a coach that can game plan them correctly in the postseason.
Do you
And
have
just
anybody
it's
in mind? I mean,
not off the top of my head. The only thing that comes to mind is not Dak Prescott. Like my brain just goes straight to like the who shouldn't be there instead of who should.
Do you think Belichick works on the Cowboys?
Ooh.
Him and Jerry
I
Jones?
mean, it would kind of suit. It would depend. Like, I don't know how to judge Bill Belichick anymore because for so long Brady kind of ran the show and they did so well, and the second he left, it's just been a steady decline with him at the helm. So I don't know how to properly rank Bill Belichick. Like he's obviously one of the greatest football minds in the sport currently and maybe of all time.
Hmm.
But he on a team where he has to produce talent on the field, like that's not going to happen. So maybe if he comes to the Cowboys where there's already talent there, he can make something happen.
Trey Lance, you want to see him give Trey Lance a shot? Should they have just put Trey Lance in that game? Just seeing what happens?
After they went down by 27, yeah, probably.
And the Pollard thing, wait, well, I guess before we mention Pollard, McCarthy, is there a candidate, ideal head coach candidate for the Cowboys?
I
Of
mean,
the
there's
Vrabel,
Belichick,
Belichick.
there's Mr. Jim Harbaugh, your guy, who I know you don't want to leave, and I don't want him to leave either. But the fact of
Do
the
you think they
matter
get
is,
Ben
he's getting
Johnson?
interviews. That could be a shot. Ben Johnson, he's going to be so coveted by so many teams. It's going to be hard. It's going to be
Would
hard to
you
get
want to
him in
go
there.
if you're the most coveted coordinator? Would you want to go work for the Cowboys as the head coach?
I mean, with how they were in the regular season, yes. But it's just
Okay.
so hard to judge them because they looked so good almost the whole year, and then they lose to the 9-8 Packers.
And the Pollard thing was disappointing as well too, because I think we were both super high on him for him. Well, I think I was
No,
probably
you were super high
I
on
was
him.
super high on him. I
I
can
tried
tell
to
it's
humble
fine.
you, and you didn't listen to me.
But you still thought he was going to be top 10.
Yeah, I still, yeah, top 10 with how like he broke out last season in a backup role. Like I expected him to do so much better, and then he gets the brunt of the carries and everything. He's still kind of a factor in the pass game, and like in this game, he had 7 receptions, 29 yards, no touchdowns.
Mm.
But like he's still been a factor in both sides of the offense, like he was as a backup, and it just hasn't been the same production. And I don't understand what changed. If it's pressure, if it's how they're trying to game plan him now as like somebody who's only going to like touch the ball on big plays, and now instead he's the guy who's going to touch the ball a majority of the game. I don't know what changed.
It seemed like he changed his running style this year a little bit. I mean, he just was super explosive the last couple of years, and maybe that is where they're designing plays for him, and the space is more available for him to operate. But it just seemed like he was more, and being a more patient runner is not always a bad thing, but just a
Mhm.
more patient runner that kind of like pause behind the line and try to like digest where everything's going, and then kind of hit the hole afterwards. Pause versus just being like an explosive running back the year before. I just it felt like he was more in like a doing like a Le'Veon Bell impersonation, like more on that end than being more,
Okay.
just like a one cut back like he was before.
So it looks like this season he averaged 5.7 yards per carry. And then I'm gonna try to find 2022. Oh no, this year he averaged four yards per carry.
Hmm.
In 2022 he was 5.2, and in 2021 he was 5.5. And it looks like in 2021 he only had 130 carries. In 2022 he had 193. And then this year he had 252, and he actually had almost 60 more carries this year from last year, and did not even reach his rushing record by 2 yards with
He is
60 more
2 yards short.
carries. He was
I
two
just
yards
pulled it up.
short.
I'm looking at it.
Yeah, I
He
just don't understand where the production went. Like he's getting more opportunities and he's not taking advantage of it, or like you said, like being more patient hasn't got him the looks that he needs to get to be able to be productive. I don't know.
So you're saying Tony Pollard's system running back?
He might be like he's kind of shown that he kind of is.
Unfortunate for the fantasy people. I'm very, that's the thing with fantasy is I am very lucky that somebody drafted him. Like, fortunately, I don't know if we want to shout out our guy Rissy, but Rissy was a little bit higher on Tony Pollard than I was because he drafted him a couple of spots ahead. Like I was going to take Tony Pollard in the second round. Tony Pollard was off the board. It ended up being AJ Brown. So I
Yeah,
had Tyreek Hill
got
and AJ
lucky.
Brown.
Number 3
Yeah.
rushing or receiving yard guy on the year.
2 years in a row, I should have won the league. Last year, I had Justin Jefferson, and he had like 38 yards in the championship game. This year, Tyreek Hill is out
Yeah,
with injury in the first round of the playoffs, and I think AJ Brown maybe something was going on with him that week too. I don't think he necessarily performed. I think maybe
I
something with Lamar was that was just a bad week for my team in general, and I
yeah
got
I
eliminated. But
I will say for fantasy, like I was never high on Pollard in the second round. Like if there was ever a draft where he would get to the third, and I'd take him as like a running back too, I would probably take a chance on him. But like he was going as high as like the second or third overall pick in the second round, and to me that just didn't really like seem like a great fit. Like he was great after he started as a backup and then eventually took the number one role last year. But I still just think like the big of a gap that he jumped in the fantasy drafts was still too high.
I would have taken him in the first round if Tyreek Hill wasn't available. But
I'm
again,
just saying.
sometimes you get lucky with this stuff. I would have taken Bijan if he was there too. Did you ended up with Bijan?
And yeah, I ended up with Bijan, and it looked like it was going to be the best pick I ever made for the first
I
like 3
know.
games of the year. And then of course, the Mr. Mustache, Arthur Smith, just had to ruin everyone's hopes and dreams with a player who played for the Falcons. And I'm hoping that'll change with the coaching switch, but we'll see.
I honestly don't even know what happened with my fantasy prep this year because I went in with a list where my team was going to be like Bijan, Devontae Adams, Waddle, Tony Pollard, And then the draft happened. I just panicked and just took all the guys I like. I took Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown. I just like take AJ Brown every year.
That's,
And
I mean, that's kind of every year when it comes to fantasy. You
yeah,
game
I
plan,
took
you write a script, and then you go in, you're like, holy shit, this isn't going to work because my friends are dumb, and I'm going to have to change every single pick that I'm going to make.
I was like, Fattaport told me Lamar is going to be the MVP of the league like 3 hours ago. I don't know what to do with this information. I was going to take Justin Herbert. I
And
drafted
who was
Lamar.
right? And who was
Yeah,
right?
my team was amazing.
I was right.
I should have won the league. Who won the league this year? Do we even know?
Ethan.
I tapped out once my team was done. I'll be back next year though.
I think good old Sullivan. It was him versus Austin in our championship. The 8 seed versus the 6 seed in our fantasy championship.
That just shows you what kind of year. Wait, so Sully is the guy that beat me. So I lost to the champion is what you're saying?
I think he's the one that won. Which I hate the way he drafts because every year it's always 5 Cowboys players and then just a random receiver who goes off every single year. And I think he did the same thing.
Yeah, some guys just Sully's one of the receiver guys. There's like I know Champ is like the rookie receiver guy. Sully's kind of like the veteran receiver guy.
He takes the old heads who end up reviving their career in the year that he picks them.
Austin's the auto draft guy. If you follow Ian Fattaport on Twitter, you guys can. Well, I know he's diversifying the portfolio, but every now and then, I'm sure the fantasy stuff will be mentioned. And if you guys want to give him a follow at Ian Fattaport, you guys can figure out what's going on in the fantasy leagues. But the best game of the day, I feel like we should mention. Who knows? Maybe we should have mentioned him first. Maybe IT needs to do a better job of planning the show. But Lions Rams, the one game of the week that was actually close. Stafford versus Goff. Goff ends up getting the win. Was this enough to say that the Lions won the trade?
I mean, it's worked out. It's honestly worked out for both teams. Like Stafford first year got a ring. So until Goff will do that, I don't know if you can necessarily say that the Lions win the trade. But like when the Rams wanted it to work, it did with Stafford, and Aaron Donald had one of the best years of his career. Cooper Kupp was the Triple Crown receiver threat of the year, offensive player of the year. So I think now they got what they wanted out of that trade, and now the Lions are starting to get what they wanted out of that trade. So I'd call it a win-win for both sides. And obviously the Rams would have liked for it to be on their side in this game, but they came up short by 1. And one of the things from this game that I thought was funny to mention is that the passing leader, rushing leader, and receiving leader from this game all came from the Rams, and they still lost by 1.
Yeah. And I honestly and we were, we're going to do a little winners draft here in a second, but as we were going through and writing down winners for each of the games, I did think that a majority of the better performances in this game did come from the Rams. Like Stafford, Goff was outstanding in this game, but Stafford now as just a playoff guy. I mean, this is back-to-back runs where, again, they didn't win this game, but he was outstanding in this game. There have only been actually 4 games in NFL history. 3 before this were both quarterbacks in the playoff game, 3 playoff games where the quarterbacks both had passer ratings of over 120. It was 2010, Aaron Rodgers versus Kurt Warner. I don't know if you remember that Packers-Cardinals game, but it was like an overtime game, 45-51. I think that was like the Rodgers had like the fumble in overtime. I forget who the Cardinals linebacker was that broke through, sacked him, stripped the ball, and then got the recovery touchdown. And then 2015 again, Romo versus Rodgers. Romo ended up losing that one. Rodgers got the win. And then 2022, Josh Allen versus Pat Mahomes. Some people say maybe the best quarterback matchup we've seen in the playoffs. And I know that was divisional round, little more drama at the end of the game with the 13 seconds and all the scoring in the 2 minutes. But I think just pound for pound, the quarterback matchup in this one was pretty even. And I know some of the numbers said that Stafford all year was, and especially at the end of the year too, was playing the better ones in the league. But I mean, some of the throws he was making in this game, and he always gets the Stafford, or the Mahomes, if Mahomes did this, everybody would be going crazy, and Stafford's just doing it on a daily basis. But I mean, this was another game where Stafford in a big moment, I don't necessarily feel, I don't feel any down on the Rams in any way after this one. I do feel like these were I don't want to say the two best teams in the the wild card weekend, because the other teams that won did play super well too. But for the NFC, maybe this weekend, I do feel like these were the two best teams in the NFC with the Niners not playing.
I agree with you there, and I especially agree that I wouldn't take this game as a big negative for the Rams, even though they did lose. It just seemed like the Lions kind of played like a Mike Tomlin role, where they played good and Goff was great, but they did
Hmm.
just enough they needed to do to win, and that's kind of like what the Steelers have been known for, other than obviously their game against the Bills this year. But with this Rams game, like Puka Nakua, he was 9 for 81 with a touchdown. He averaged 20 yards per reception, and he had the best rookie playoff game in the history of the NFL when it comes to receivers. So this is just the start for this team. Like I think their preseason rank, everything's going to be a lot higher going into next season. Their expectations are going to be higher because of not only the veterans they have in Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford, but to have the young rookie and Puka Nakua, and even Kyron Williams, who came onto the scene out of nowhere. It pretty much seemed like this is a team that if they can get their defense together, keep Aaron Donald around, add some secondary help, they could be pretty scary next year. So I wouldn't take this as a negative. Take this in the next season, keep the momentum rolling.
And this was even hard to like go through and go back and watch and even try to figure out like from a coaching, from a game plan, from a play calling standpoint, like what went wrong. Because even with Kyron Williams, like I think they ran the ball well in this game. And you could say that maybe they run the ball a little bit more. But again, with the way Stafford was playing in this one, like playing like one of the better quarterbacks in the league. I mean, just like the spiral on the ball, like the ball was not moving. Like it was just like perfect flight, like every time. Like I don't know if Stafford was the best quarterback this weekend, but definitely like the most picture perfect passes from any of the guys. So maybe I maybe like better corners, get better corners in the offseason or something, or just the corners that they have there. Everybody on that defense outside of Donald is a younger player. So,
Yeah.
everybody returning for another year is maybe the thing. But I think it was brutal for either of these teams that they had to play each other. Maybe honestly, like the Rams in Tampa, was it just the matchups again, like you were saying to start the pod, the Bucks and the Eagles were not playing well to end the year, but the Rams, playing as well as they did in the loss, looking like one of the better teams in the league, and the Bucks as well too. And Baker Mayfield looked outstanding this week against the Eagles. Was it just the matchups like you were saying, or are these teams like? Do we actually have to worry about the Bucks now against the Lions this week? Is Baker Mayfield versus Goff the new? Is this the new quarterback duels that we're looking for? Stafford Goff next week, and then Mayfield Goff this week.
I don't know if I necessarily would fear like the Bucks coming into Detroit and playing this game. I kind of attribute like Baker Mayfield's been playing the game the way he's been playing this season is a perfect example of what you have to do to beat the Eagles, especially with the injuries in their secondary and just
Hmm.
the overall collapse of their entire team in the last like 6 weeks of the year. I think it was just like perfectly suited to play to beat this team. And when it comes to the Lions and quarterbacks, the only real trouble they have against quarterbacks this year has been quarterbacks who run the ball and the dual threats. So now that they won't have to play a team like the Eagles and they're going to come in and play, or the Bucks are going to come in and the Lions will have to play a guy who likes to throw the ball, string it out in the air a lot. I still would definitely take the Lions in this game. I don't fear the Bucks coming into it, but it might be closer than you would seem it would be on paper with how the Bucks have been playing the last couple weeks of the season.
Do you trust, just bigger picture? Do you trust the Lions defense to get a stop? Because I don't know if we can. I don't even know if we can say that it's a good defense. Like it's hard to say. Like Puka Nakua had an amazing game. I know the secondary, at least some of the cornerback spots, can be a weakness. I like Melifonwu back there as a
Mhm.
safety, and I know Champ is a big Kirby Joseph guy, but just like on a third down in a big moment, say they're playing the Niners in the NFC Championship game, like do you do you feel good about the Lions defense in big spots like that to make plays?
In recent years, I would tell you no, but honestly, with this defense, how they're kind of shaping up to be, I trust them more than I usually would. I do think that their secondary, other than Gardner Johnson, is pretty young with the amount of experience that everybody has there. Cam Sutton, I know, was beat on a long one by Puka in this game. I remember seeing
Yeah,
that. That was one of the bigger plays.
he's had
But
an
I
up and
think
down year.
I think their secondary will be able to keep up against the Bucks. The guys that were rushing the quarterback, especially like Aiden Hutchinson, he had 2 TFLs and 2 sacks, 5 quarterbacks hits in this game. He was a guy who came off the edge and was a threat to Stafford, and I guess that's kind of how you can attribute to how they won. I'm still like you said, I still don't know how they won this game, and I don't know how the Rams lost when you go back and watch it. It's just kind of like something that happened. It's like there's not really a good explanation for it. But I trust them enough to try to make those plays if it comes to like a third and short or something big in a moment where they're going to have to force a stop. I could definitely see them doing it.
The Hutchinson thing has just been ridiculous for this team because he's like the one guy that has passed through Michigan recently, paused that like I would say that I would want to be on the that I wish was on the national title team that had won this year. Like if Hutch had because he was homegrown Michigan guy, his dad had played at Michigan, and they'd gotten close obviously with the TCU matchup. Well, I guess he wasn't on the team at that point. That would have been his rookie year last year, but they'd gotten close beating Ohio State the couple seasons before that. And if he had been on the team, that would have been clutch to see. But he didn't get like the sack numbers, like the total sack numbers this year to like be like up there with the league leaders. But all of the other pressure numbers, like the, just the overall pressures, QB hits, all of the other pressure, like win rate metrics stuff, he was basically top of the league, number one throughout all of the major defensive line categories. So, and you just watch like his ferocity rushing the passer is almost unstoppable one on one versus any left tackle. And he's going to be he's just a guy where he is a guy where I just think that in a third down, a big moment, I think Hutch could just get to the quarterback whenever he wants. He's just going to make a big play. Yeah,
it's like scary how he can just come through the pause, how he could just like bull rush through the line. Like if I'm a quarterback, that's one of like the 10 guys in the NFL I don't want staring at me, coming on me. Okay, wait, this is gonna sound so bad.
Super
coming at me alone. Yeah, fuck it, I don't care. Clip it.
No, you just throw a pause. It is what it is.
No, I'm.
It's I feel like half of the things that are said. I mean, you listen to Collinsworth. Collinsworth is doing like an X-rated moaning broadcast every Sunday night. So
every time he watches Mahomes, he gets a little.
I think that's why they're moving the games to Peacock, just because Collinsworth is so aggressive on these broadcasts talking about Jordan Love. People are gonna have to start paying to watch it. They can't show it to the kids. It's
gonna have to give it an R rating before people start to watch the game.
Did you have any parting thoughts for the Eagles before we get to the winners draft? Do you think Sirianni still keeps his? Is he still there next time we do this?
I think he's still. I don't really know. He's still the coach that I feel like needs to be there for that team and that culture. Like they've done so well ever since he's got there up until the last like 7 games. They've won 1-6 in their last 7, including this playoff game. Up until then, they were a very solid team with Hurts and the Eagles. And as soon as he got there, they went all the way, lost in the Super Bowl by a couple points. I don't think that this collapse ends up with him losing his job, but it's definitely going to be a question mark going into next season, whether he still has it by the end of next year. And it just seems
he's
like
on the clock now.
Yeah, it just seems like he's lost the locker room, and Jalen Hurts isn't able to take control of it either. And honestly, if I'm a player on that team, and I'm passionate about this. If every fucking time we lose, our quarterback takes the mic and goes, "This is just a learning process. We'll be coming back," I would probably hit him. Because, like, how many times do you have to say it until you actually do it?
Huh?
Like losing to a team like the Giants in like a controversial game to decide playoff seeding, you lose to a third-string quarterback and a bunch of receivers that they probably just went to Walmart and took them off of the hourly wage shift, and you lose. And I know their secondary was beat up, but like the caliber of the team you have, you can't afford to do that. And when you do that, things like this are going to happen. And now everybody's questioning the ability of Jalen Hurts. Everybody's questioning the coaching ability of Nick Sirianni, and apparently AJ Brown's now being the biggest fucking diva on the team, deleting all of his Eagles stuff on Instagram. I'm assuming this offseason we're going to see him wanting to get a trade somewhere. It's going so downhill, and they have so little time to try to put this back together.
And there was some like secret practice stuff with Hurts. Not saying like Hurts, the locker room was turning on Hurts, but there was, I mean, was it just me? But I thought there was like some stuff that was starting to, there was some rumblings that were starting to happen about the Eagles locker room. I mean, there was a players only meeting at one point during the regular season. So I guess
Yeah.
they weren't just rumblings. But speaking of Philly, quickly, 111 to 107 versus the Nuggets. They're in the fourth quarter right now. Nuggets are
Mm.
still on top, but again, this game just continues to be right neck and neck.
I call
I did.
myself a Nuggets fan, but this will probably be a game where I look up like the highlights and stuff for it.
You got to go
When you
watch.
get like
So
Embiid and Jokic on the court like that, like I know enough about the NBA to know that that's a good matchup.
for the big NBA games, the NBA on their YouTube channel does this thing called like fantastic finishes. So if any game is,
Oh,
close in the fourth quarter, last 7, 8 minutes, they'll just throw it up on the YouTube channel and you can watch the end of the game. It's actually pretty clutch. I mean, you get, especially in the regular season, just a good, 8 minute chunk of the fourth quarter. You're watching a lot of, good basketball there with
I'll probably
them
do
just
that.
throwing
Yeah,
it
if
up.
that game
But
gets put up there, that's probably. I'll either look for that or if they like. I know the NFL after their games will post like a 12 minute like just like a
mhm.
summary of highlights.
And they
That's
have those
probably
too.
yeah. That's probably what I'll look for. That's what I usually like to watch.
110, 111 now. Embiid checks back in the game, 7.5 minutes left. There was one person at the Eagles Bucks game that I did think made an interesting appearance. And people were saying that Lincoln Riley was there. He's watching the quarterbacks that he coached. Baker Mayfield being a big one, but Jalen Hurts, he did transfer in there, played under
Hmm.
Lincoln Riley as well. Pause. And if you're just looking at a situation you want to go to as a coach, I think especially, if you're going to leave USC in college as well, too, the Eagles' job coaching Jalen Hurts is a guy that you wanted, once coached in college. Lincoln Riley to Philly. Does Philly have to make that move if that's on the table?
It depends because like is Philly confident to like excuse me to bring in a coaching staff built around Jalen Hurts with how big of a downfall he's had this season, or is their narrative by the end of next season going to be to get away from Hurts? Like it just depends. It really depends on next season. I think they're on the clock now. I don't think that like this stretch has decided to be like, oh, these guys aren't built to be in Philly, but it puts them it puts them in like the witching hour. Like I'll shout out Scott Hansen for
Yeah.
the red zone stuff. But like this is the witching hour between now and the end of next season.
Hmm.
Everything they do in those games are going to be watched and will decide whether they both have jobs by the end of next season. So if it gets to that point, if Hurts is good and the game plan sucks and it's all coaching, maybe Lincoln Riley to Philly. I don't know if he'd come in as an OC quarterback coach or a head coach. I don't know if he would make that
Head
big of a
coach?
jump
I
from
think he
like
has to be head coach.
college head coach to NFL head coach.
I think if you're bringing in Lincoln Riley, I think he's the head guy.
Yeah, he has. I mean, yeah, he has the resume to do that. Head coach at Oklahoma, head coach at USC, arguably
Heisman
one of the best
winners.
quarterback prospects in the history of the NFL was coached under him.
The reason I think that could be, of all of the other potential candidates, an interesting one, and especially, it's not just the connection between those two guys, but I do think that the loss of Shane Steichen is big for this offense, and I
Yeah.
think it's big for Hurts specifically as well, too. And Steichen didn't just do it with Hurts; he did it with Herbert. He was the guy that was there with the initial Herbert years, kind of developed him, and he was there the last 2 seasons with the Eagles. So I know the 21 season was, a development season for Hurts, but there last year when he was there, it really seemed like I think everybody that watched that Philly team just knew that play calling was on point all year. And you watch the
Mhm.
Colts this year, like we said, even in that Texans game, I still think we like the stuff that they did, even on that
Oh
last
yeah.
drive. And I do think that was a major loss for this team. So I'm interested to see, like you're saying, Hurts now year 2 without Steichen. What does that look like? And if you're trying to fix Jalen Hurts and still build around him and build that way, because there's still a lot of amazing young talent there, a guy like Lincoln Riley, a play calling focused guy where Sirianni is an offensive coordinator too, but I think
Yeah.
a real play caller, high level play caller would be, I think, the move to make if they were to make a move.
I would argue that even like the loss of Gannon on their as their defensive coordinator probably even gave him a bigger impact. Like they had
Hmm.
two close games against the Commanders, which should have never happened. They lose a game to the Giants down the stretch because their defense just played poorly. And like a big thing in like the last 6 games, like their defense was not able to try to keep games close for their offense to succeed. Gannon leaving and going to the Cardinals, and obviously like he didn't have the result that they wanted in Arizona. But he played a huge impact on the defense last year for the Eagles, and that's how they got to the Super Bowl. Is they played great defense, and their offense was able to capitalize on that. This year, it's been a combination of just shitty play calling on offense and the defense not being able to help them out. Like if one's not going to work, the other one has to, and when you have neither, that's how you lose games. Like you start 8-1, 9-1, and then you just completely shit the bed because the defense either got too cocky or just was awful.